How God's love works, a rational view. Many of us may recall when young, having another child tell us something like this: "I hate you," or "You're not my friend anymore." Adults actually do similar things, usually do them more politely, but perhaps even in a more conniving and treacherous way. The fact that these open insults do not happen more often illustrate how much I would suggest the gospel has already impacted on our world. Yet those officially mandated to tell us our history are paid by secular governments to do what? To credit the gospel with as little as possible. Now I would like to ask, what was life like before the gospel came along? Or even before God began revealing himself to Abraham? Imagine a time and place in which killing someone to solve problems was hegemonically common sense. That is, rulers were not politicians like they are today, guided by laws, but monarchs considered to be divine. Monarchs who made up rules as it went along. You can get a feeling for such situation from the following examples. Now, the first example is Simonsi's account of traditional kings in the Sudan. Simonsi tells us that the kings measured their power in terms of the capacity to victimize subjects. The gross cruelties enjoyed by large audiences in Roman amphitheatres would be another example. We could look at the widespread practice of human sacrifice by ancient people. That is, people like the Aztecs, but frankly many others. Accounts of traditional Africa's constant searches for what? For victims. Melland gives many accounts of killings and death in a pre-colonial Zambian tribe. That's in his book entitled In Which Bound Africa. In Western Kenya, young men would often go in search of people to kill, that is, following the death of one of their own elders. This ritual of searching people to kill was known as teruburu. To assess the value of the gospel of Jesus without a correct understanding of history can be kind of to presuppose that which we want to evaluate. For example, presupposing that historically people felt about victims as many do in Western cultures today. This can lead us to overlooking realities in African culture. I love to hear stories that tell of falsely accused victims being acquitted. A friend of mine recently said. He said that to me. The comment struck me. In my head I thought, well, me too. Partly no doubt because I often see myself as a victim or potential victim. Knowledge of victimizations can evoke a deep longing for justice. Unfortunately, this attitude about justice and victimhood has not always been universal or even widespread. That is, victims are often considered undeserving historically. In Africa, for example, someone being considered envious has often sufficed to justify victimizing them. In Western cultures, finding a victim can be sweet, pointing fingers, gossiping about them, putting people down can make me feel better. Should their guilt be proven, like through an ordeal, or maybe through their own suffering, guilt is proven if someone obviously suffers, I can rejoice. African people may consider their problems to be caused by so-and-so's bewitching them. This can be confirmed by divination and ratified by the victim's suffering. Many people have long believed that had the victim really been innocent, well, then they wouldn't have succumbed. Once they're gone, I anticipate things going better for me. When a victim, someone dies who seems to be guilty, I feel better. The devil really enjoys giving out that good feeling, I think. People have long been sure that the envy of others lies at the base of their problems. This understanding underlies witchcraft in Africa today. This has made it difficult to convince people of God's love. Jesus' ministry flatly failed to convince the people of his time, and he knew that he would fail, Matthew 16:21. Instead, Pilate knew that Jewish leaders were envious of Jesus, and he was condemned as a witch, Matthew 27:18. The devil rejoiced, but the devil had been duped. He had not realized that Jesus would resurrect, and that God had a plan for people, not only for this life, but for eternal life. Relativizing worldly suffering with respect to eternity makes sense of the suffering. People who feel they're shortchanged by worldly injustices may be rewarded in eternity. Thus, the resurrection of Jesus itself demonstrates a possibility of God's love. Peter tells us that the Jesus who had been crucified by the wicked was the one accredited by God, Acts 2:22. God, by his Spirit, helps Jesus' disciples to realize it is wrong to kill others so as to prosper. They should be forgiving others. The message of forgiveness put the cat among the pigeons. Hating is easier than forgiving. Attributing blame to someone else, assuming them to be guilty, then killing them. This had helped people cope with life for a long time. Killing a mutual suspect can mend broken relationships, such as that of Herod and Pilate, Luke 23:12. Sometimes people, or even animals, were killed to cleanse a community, or maybe to solve a problem. That was the only way to forgive. Jesus became a substitute for sacrifice for eternity. Forgiving people is tough, but Christians took on this challenge. Being able to forgive, that is to forgive someone, is a way of declaring acceptance of God's forgiveness for oneself. In other words, people really are guilty. They do wrong things, deserving of death. But God can forgive. The above resulted in the new Christian movement applying the principle of forgiveness, even to enemies. Isn't that amazing? Matthew 5:44. This meant witches can be forgiven. Such application of God's love has changed the world. Galatians 5:12.